And elsewhere, though, it is a dry picture, again with lengthy clear periods for good parts of England and Wales, some clear spells for Northern Ireland and the rest of Scotland too. But whether it's cloudy or it's clear, it's going to be quite a warm night with temperatures no lower than the low to mid-teens. So the air mass is starting to warm up. A few uncomfortable nights ahead, perhaps, for some of us. And then Sunday, we do it all over again. So a wet start across the far north of Scotland, particularly Orkney and Shetland, but that range will tend to clear away. And then I think more widely we'll see some sunshine through Sunday. So where we've had quite a bit of cloud across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, well, more sunshine here, temperatures widely a little bit higher than on Saturday. And that sets the scene for a warming trend with plenty of sunshine into next week. For some of us, temperatures into the low 30s.
On Mark Dolan tonight, full reaction to the fallout from Boris Johnson's resignation. In the big question, what is his legacy? We'll debate that with his biographer, Tom Bower. Reacting to the big stories of the day are my panel, including Boris Johnson supporting commentator Sophie Corcoran and the Prime Minister's former top aide, Kulveer Ranger. My Mark Meets guest is boxing legend Duke Mckenzie. And in my big opinion monologue, my verdict on Boris Johnson's 3 years at the helm. See you at 9.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello, is that the Durham Tandoori? Yes, I'd like to book a table for Keir Starmer, please. 3 people will be there. Sorry, no, 5. 5 people. No, 15 will be people. Angela Rayner, no, she's not. Yes, she's going to be there as well. Just make sure there's plenty of beer. Cheers. Yes, indeed, folks. Keir Starmer is in the clear, Sir Keir Starmer, but was it a right royal stitch-up? We'll get reaction from my panel. Also, all of the fallout from Boris Johnson's resignation. In my big question, what is his legacy? And reacting to those big stories of the day, pro-Boris political commentator Sophie Corcoran, reality star and model, the remarkable and highly talented Declan Doyle, and Boris Johnson's former top advisor, Kulveer Ranger. Also, I'll be discussing what's next for Boris Johnson. We'll speak to his former biographer, the amazing, the remarkable Tom Bower. Also in the news agenda with my panel, is his downfall all down to Carrie? Plus, the Tory leadership contenders will be analysed by Britain's top body language expert. That's right, the remarkable Darren Stanton is live later in the show. My Mark Meets guest is boxing legend Duke Mckenzie, and in my big opinion, my first public comments since Boris stepped down. That's right, you won't want to miss that in 2 minutes' time. A very, very busy show. I'll see you after the headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Former Conservative Party chairman Oliver Dowden has announced that he's backing Rishi Sunak's leadership bid. Earlier, the former Chancellor launched his campaign on social media, saying he wanted to restore trust, rebuild the economy and reunite the country. Prominent Tory backbencher Tom Tugendhat has also declared that he will run. New Education Secretary James Cleverly told GB News there'll be plenty of decent candidates.
Personal circumstances mean that I won't be putting myself forward, but I'm also confident that we have a pool of talent which will enable us to choose someone with fantastic experience, whoever that might be.
Sir Keir Starmer has been cleared by police of breaking lockdown rules last year. The Labour leader and his deputy, Angela Rayner, had promised to resign if they were fined. Videos showed him drinking beer and eating curry with colleagues during a visit to Durham, but police say they obeyed the law. Speaking at a press conference, Sir Keir said truth and integrity matter.
People said to me I was taking a risk by saying I would step down if I was fined. But it was never about that. For me, it was a matter of principle. It shouldn't be controversial to say that those who make the law can't break the law. But we have to set the bar far higher than that.
In other news, police say the man accused of killing Japan's ex-leader has a grudge against a group he thought Shinzo Abe was a part of. The former Prime Minister was shot from behind while giving a speech at a political event. He later died in hospital. Investigators say the 41-year-old suspect is in custody and has admitted to using a homemade gun in the attack. So Mark Rowley is the new commissioner of the Met Police. He replaces Dame Cressida Dick, who announced that she was leaving the role back in February. Sir Mark is a former counter-terrorism officer who left the force 4 years ago. Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says he's the best person for the job.
A series of appalling scandals have not only exposed deep cultural problems within the Met, but have contributed to a crisis of confidence in London's police service. Sir Mark has made clear to me that he's determined to be a reforming commissioner.
And Cameron Norrie has lost his semi-final match against Novak Djokovic at Wimbledon. The 26-year-old British #1 was defeated by 3-1 on centre court. He's only the fourth British man to ever reach the last four at the All England club. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This, of course, is GB News. Now back to Mark Dolan tonight.
On Mark Dolan tonight, Keir Starmer off the hook. Sir Keir Starmer will get reaction from my panel and all of the fallout from Boris Johnson's resignation. In the big question, what is Boris's legacy? We'll hear from a range of experts, including the man that he beat in London, former Mayor Ken Livingstone, and the former advisor to Boris, Coulvier Ranger, who's, I'm delighted to say, my panellist tonight, and former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. We're going to analyse Boris's speech yesterday in the company of body language expert Darren Stanton, and he'll be analysing the body language of the candidates who hope to be our next PM. And in my panel, reacting to the big stories of the day, reality star and model, a warm welcome for the first time to the very talented Declan Doyle, Boris supporting political commentator Sophie Corcoran, and Boris Johnson's former top advisor, as I've mentioned, Coulvier Ranger. And my Mark Meets guest tonight is boxing legend Duke Mckenzie, who tells his incredible story at 10. In the news agenda with my panel, what's next for Boris? Is his downfall all Carrie's fault? Plus, the Tory leadership contenders, as I've said, analysed by Britain's top body language expert. You won't want to miss that. Also before 10, we'll speak to Tom Bower, Boris's biographer, all about what the future holds for the blonde bombshell. I want to hear from you throughout the show, mark@gbnews.uk. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. So, for the next 2 hours, big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. Now, it didn't have to be this way. The man who got Brexit done ultimately did for himself. The outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson, halfway through a book about Shakespeare, another unfinished project, will discover that parting is such sweet sorrow, and that his time centre stage at number 10 is playing out like a tragedy with a touch of comedy thrown in. Whilst there's a lot of noise about the media being out to get Boris, which is true, and scheming politicians being disloyal, which is also true, unlike the plot of Julius Caesar, it was ultimately Boris himself who plunged the knife into his own back. Et tu, Brute? More like et tu, Boris. Like an F1 star that takes those bends a little too quickly, or the boxer that signs up for one fight too many, Boris Johnson has finally run out of luck. It's been a career of risk, of peril, of danger, and of excitement. It's no accident that Tom Bower's biography of Bojo is called The Gambler, and this time the cards did not go Boris's way. He's backed the wrong horse, and the crap table turned pretty crap. I'll be talking to Tom Bower later this hour. Ultimately, Boris Johnson's legacy is secure, and it will age well, and I want to thank him. He kept Putin-sympathising Corbyn out of number 10. Can you imagine if Corbyn had been in charge during the pandemic or handling the war with Ukraine? Boris ended our Brexit nightmare, unleashed global Britain, and presided over a world-class vaccine rollout. He pushed back against the worst excesses of SAGE and presided over Britain being the first country in Europe to depart from lockdowns. Not that he should have done them in the first place, which in my view is the greatest blemish on his record. Aided and abetted by doomsday scientists and the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson discarded his freedom-loving libertarian instincts by locking us up on and off for 2 years. He discarded his alleged conservative economic principles by paying healthy people to stay at home, closing once viable businesses, borrowing hundreds of billions of pounds, and smashing the economy against a brick wall. Any one of the brave 100 Tory backbenchers who voted against lockdowns would have been a better pandemic PM than scaredy-cat Boris. That's right, scaredy-cat Boris. Old Larry the cat has a bigger pair of balls, frankly. Watch this. There's Larry. Blimey, that's like Cummings versus Johnson. Can we watch that one more time, Robin? We do love a game of cat and mouse, I've got to say. Well, we'll get to that later because it is classic. But, OK, here it is. Let's go. I love that video. Larry for PM, he's no pussy. In the end, Boris Johnson was missold to the public. Bold and buccaneering was his image, but he was cowardly in the face of the sage scientists. He was the king of levelling up, except he seemed more interested in levelling up Mariupol than Manchester, even snubbing the Northwest recently by not turning up in favour of a photo op with his best pal Zelensky. But I think the saddest thing about his 3 years in charge is the squandering of that 80-seat majority and the failure to give those lifelong Labour voters in the Red Wall what they asked for: proper control of our borders, investment in the North, and a full-fat Brexit. Serious times call for serious leadership, but it's abundantly clear that Boris Johnson doesn't take anything seriously, even his own political career. Michael Gove famously knifed Boris in the first leadership elections after David Cameron fell, because, as Gove's brilliant ex-wife Sarah Vine points out in the Mail today, Boris didn't even take his own bid for the top job seriously. Whilst putting together Johnson's leadership campaign in 2016, hammering the phones, securing donations and assembling a team, Michael Gove discovered that the man himself, Boris, was with friends in the country, flipping burgers, guzzling rosé and playing cricket. In the end, all he got was a sticky wicket. Now, I didn't care about Partygate because my objection was to the stupid rules in the first place. But the sight of crates of wine and beer literally being carted into number 10 whilst people said goodbye to their relatives on a computer will be an image that lingers. People locked at home as mandarins, aides and politicians gave it large with a karaoke machine and a wine box, snogging in the corridors of power and throwing up on the number 10 carpet. Just as the American authorities captured the notorious gangster Al Capone, not for his murders, but for tax dodging, so it was a relatively unexpected twist in the tale that did for Boris, the role of the Deputy Chief Whip, Mr. Pincher. Why was that important? Because Boris Johnson lied about knowing this man's background. And on this, in terms of lying, Boris has form. Girlfriends, wives, previous jobs, wallpaper, tree houses, secret meetings, you name it. Entertaining chancer he may be, but he's not honest. He's not straight, and frankly, you deserve better. Now, many of you won't agree with what I'm saying, and I know that many are gutted that he's gone. But I, for one, will never bullshit you, even if it's a tough message or one you don't want to hear. I owe that to you, and I will never change. I say it as I see it, and I think the country, and I think you, deserve someone with more reverence and respect for this great office of Prime Minister than what we've got. Now, don't get me wrong, Sir Keir Starmer would have been 10 times worse. And this Beergate hypocrite and his party clearly lied about how many people attended that event in Durham and lied about Angela Rayner's presence. For that, old Starmer should be out too. But it seems the Durham police have let him off the hook. I noticed Durham's Chief Constable, Joe Farrell, has been awarded a new $555,000 contract by the Labour Police and Crime Commissioner, Joy Allen. I do hope the two are not connected. I think the public will punish old Starmer for his Beergate hypocrisy at the next election anyway. All they've got to do is put this damning video on the election ad. Labour are buzzing now, of course, from the Durham let-off and are talking about a snap election and a fresh start. More like fresh hell. I wish Boris Johnson had made more of a success of his time in office, and there are positives. But his premiership has collapsed like a Ponzi scheme. Ultimately, the numbers didn't add up and collapsed around him. The House of Cards fell, and it's now time to reshuffle the pack. The next appointment is the most significant since 1979, when Britain was the sick and lazy man of Europe. If we get this appointment right, we will emerge from the biggest economic shock since the war as one of the great freedom-loving, democratic, successful sovereign nations on earth. If we get it wrong, our great country may never recover. It's do or die. May the best man or woman win. Reacting to all of that are reality star and model Declan Doyle, pro-Boris political commentator Sophie Corcoran, and former advisor to the Prime Minister, Kulveer Ranger. Kulveer, if I could start with you, I believe that Britain deserves better than Boris Johnson.
Well, you could say that, Mark, but I think Britain got quite a good Prime Minister at the time they really needed it. Now, you'd expect me to say that, but if we think of those Herculean challenges that he faced, the stagnation, the country was going nowhere. We were getting bored senseless with a Prime Minister that couldn't solve the political conundrum that was Brexit, let alone get her own party into shape to unite behind it. And getting the Conservative Party to be united behind Europe took a once-in-a-generation politician. Boris Johnson did that. Then dealing with something that obviously the whole world had to deal with, COVID, but ensuring, I know you're not happy with how he dealt with it in the economy, but this country came out of it stronger, faster, and in better shape than most other countries around the world. And obviously showing the international leadership to stand up to the biggest bully of them all at the moment, President Putin and reinforcing President Zelensky's need for help and support from all international leaders. That's what Boris Johnson has done, and I think he put Britain back in its place, leading on the global stage.
Kulveer, did he have to go?
At the end, I think it comes to a point when people aren't listening to you and they can't hear your messages because they're being drowned out by all the other noise that had emerged. There were problems, he made mistakes, there were issues. Obviously, I won't deny that. But he had also done a lot of good things, but his voice was not going to be heard. Those things were drowning him out. And so in the end, yes, I think he did have to go.
Sophie Corcoran, a history of dishonesty, lying to his newspaper editor at the Times over a fake article, lying to wives and girlfriends, ultimately lying to the country. He had to go.
No. I think getting rid of the Prime Minister has been quite possibly the most catastrophic decision this country has made. First of all, we've effectively allowed the media in our country to oust the Prime Minister, giving them more power to determine who leads our country than the actual electorate itself. But the noise that we've seen lately is, let's be quite honest with you here, the problems that we have in this country, the cost of living crisis, what we've got on with Ukraine, the immigration crisis, they are much more significant to our personal lives, and they actually affect our standards of living than birthday cake, wallpaper and whatever Chris Pinch is doing. Now we have no Prime Minister for 3 months. We've got a divided and distracted government at a time where this country is in complete and utter crisis. Those problems that ousted him were insignificant. The problems that we're ignoring, because now we've got to do all of this palaver and this chaos, of what is actually stopping people from my communities heating our homes, getting to work, and things that are actually affecting our day-to-day lives. I'm tired of the childish game playing in politics because it is dragging this country into the gutter, and the selfish MPs and the media are responsible for it.
Well, Sophie, I share your view that Partygate was leveraged by the media in a kind of anti-Boris agenda, but you talk about the mess the country's in, you're absolutely right, caused by Boris Johnson and his lockdowns. 100 Tory MPs voted against the third national lockdown. Surely he's to blame.
Well, yes, you know, he is to blame, and as are all of the cabinet. But let's be honest here. The likelihood of us replacing somebody with a minister that has not been in the cabinet is going to be quite low. And they're going to set it up so that doesn't happen. So everybody in that cabinet room is responsible for the mess that this country's in. All we're going to do is get a different person with the same ideas, the same policies, but we're going to take 3 months to do it and drag this country into the gutter and this party into the gutter while we're doing it.
Declan Doyle, do you have a strong view about the Prime Minister's departure?
Yeah, I'm quite happy about this. I think Boris Johnson is nothing more than a Poundland version of Donald Trump. I think he's stole £100 billion of taxpayers' money. He's put the country into $9 billion loss a year due to Brexit. I think, the man's meant to run our country, gets out of the bed, doesn't even brush his hair. How are we letting this man, how did we let this man run our country and the mess that it's in now?
Now, when you say stole £100 billion, where'd you get that from, Declan?
That's I done my research and I read that.
Do you mean in relation to the misappropriation of funds for COVID, PPE contracts and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Well, there certainly is a case to answer. I mean, clearly you're not a fan, Declan. Many people watching this are gutted that Boris is gone because they voted for him and they'd like it to be their choice about who stays Prime Minister, not other MPs or the media. What would you say to that?
Well, that's just the way it's been, the way it's played out, unfortunately. I'm very happy that Boris Johnson has left. I think he's a joke, and I can't believe he even got elected in the first place.
What's your view, Mark? At gbnews.uk, this programme is all about opinions. So much more to get through in the big question next. What is Boris Johnson's legacy? That'll be a fascinating conversation, and one which we will be having with the man that Boris defeated in London, former Mayor Ken Livingstone, also former leader of UKIP, a man that knows Boris intimately well, Henry Bolton. Plus, we'll hear again from Kulveer Ranger, Boris's former top aide, who is our panellist tonight. Also, later in the show, my Mark Meets guest is boxing legend Duke Mckenzie, and we're going to have a look at the runners and riders of the Tory leadership Seen through the eyes of Britain's top body language expert, Darren Stanton. All of that to come. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I'll see you in 2.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Big reaction on email to my big opinion monologue. How about this from Bill, who says, Mark, I'm not a fan of Boris or any other politician. However, Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner not getting a fine is an absolute disgrace. Just a thought, what a coincidence that the decision not to issue the fine came the day after Boris resigned. What a coincidence. I really hope that the Tories get a suitable replacement to keep out Starmer and his communist-loving party. Andrew says, I've been slightly confused by some GB News coverage, saying Boris did nothing wrong at all when he did keep lying and humiliated other Conservatives by making them go out and speak on his behalf. Thank you for that one. And how about this? Daniel says, Mark, I think Boris Johnson was all right, even though he might have made the odd few mistakes whilst being Prime Minister. Well, what is Boris Johnson's legacy? That's the topic of the big question right now. Is he the political genius that kept Corbyn out of Downing Street, rolled out the vaccine and delivered Brexit? Or the self-destructive party animal who lacked the gravitas and integrity required for high office? Well, I'm delighted to debate this. In the studio with Henry Bolton, OBE, the former leader of the UK Independence Party, who urged Johnson to fight on. Ken Livingstone, who was beaten by Johnson in the 2008 London mayoral elections. It's fair to say that Ken had achieved 2 terms by then. And still with us from my panel, Coolvia Ranger, Boris Johnson's former advisor. Let me start with you, if I can, Henry Bolton. Do you think Boris should have fought on?
There's one reason why I think he should have done. Fine if the party were to remove him because he had committed major errors, for example, breaches of national security, really messed up the economy and so on. Some people might think that he did. But actually, when it came down to it, it was a drip campaign from certain sections of the media that were dealing with wallpaper costs, Partygate, and ultimately Mr. Pincher. So that's the problem I have. And I think that is no reason to remove a Prime Minister of Great Britain. If you want to attack him for errors of judgment, you'd be correct. If you wanted to attack him for negligence in relation to political risk relating to his party and to his nation, perhaps indeed you can attack him on that. But that's not actually what that campaign was about. And that media campaign set the context for a number of Tory MPs, backbenchers, to move against him, and an opportunist sort of chance for the more ambitious members of the Parliamentary Conservative Party. So I think that's my problem with it, and that's why I urged him to fight on as long as he could.
I mean, I mentioned in my big opinion monologue that the House of Cards was a house of lies, and in the end, the cards fell. Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid, they resigned, I would imagine, with a heavy heart from the cabinet, because they felt they had a duty of care to the country that Boris Johnson, given the amount of lies that were being spouted from Number 10 around Mr. Pincher, meant that he is just not a fit and proper person for the job.
But he wasn't actually really selected in that way, was he, as Prime Minister? And if you look at if we talk about legacy, what we've got is he is the Prime Minister who delivered Brexit. He's not an ideological Brexiteer, he's an opportunistic one, that's true. But he also, slow starter, but he got the thing going with COVID, and we actually came out of that quite well as a nation under his leadership. Ukraine, indisputably a leader on Ukraine. These are three major things for a Prime Minister in 3 years. It's no small thing. And I think, when we talk about the lies and so on, I get it that there's a question of integrity. But ultimately, that wasn't what the media campaign was that created that context. It was this drip feed that Carrie had spent £200,000, as it now turns out, on refurbishing Number 10. It was, as I said earlier, all about the Partygate issue, and it was about the appointment. The Prime Minister makes a huge number of appointments. It's probably well over 80. And one of them has been shown to be an appointment of very poor judgment. So in that context, I really think, and the Washington Post today is talking about this and saying, only the British could actually remove a Prime Minister for such things when there are such major challenges facing the UK and the international community. So that's my problem with it, and that's why I urged him to fight on, because I think he has left a legacy. He will go down in the history books. I don't think he's been a particularly good Prime Minister. No. But then I'm not defending him. I'm attacking the process by which it happened. And I would say, so just finally, I would say that I think actually, at the end of the day, the big question here is about whether or not there is any leadership available. We see Rishi Sunak, we see others coming forward for the leadership, but are they also opportunistic? And does the House of Commons, this is my question, does the House of Commons nowadays actually possess any strategic leadership acumen anywhere, on any of the benches? We've got a problem in British politics, and that is, like Boris, he's not been able to bring vision, direction and cohesion across government or to the nation, and I don't think there's any politician sitting in that House of Commons who is capable of doing that job. And that's the problem we've got to address as a nation, and political parties. It's about how they select their candidates.
Ken Livingstone, this is good news for the Labour Party. The Tories have just sacked or lost an election-winning machine.
Well, that's the defining thing. I don't really think Boris is a politician. He never has a great political strategy, I think. He wants to be a famous celebrity, and that's what he's been about. You actually look, the 8 years he was mayor, he did virtually nothing except he built the cable car to nowhere, which is costing us millions every week.
Well, he presided over a lot of economic growth in the capital, amazing construction boom, jobs.
He inherited all the projects I'd started, and he opened them, but he never invited me along to all of that. He didn't initiate anything. He is not a politician, he's a celebrity. And, I mean, literally, you look at, he's been Prime Minister for almost 3 years. He has achieved very, very little. He doesn't have a strategy. And that's what I look at all the options now, and I think Sunak's most probably the best. But I can't believe the sort of chaos there is there now, in the Tory party. Whereas you look at Labour, Keir Starmer came into politics to make life better for people, not to be a celebrity. And if you actually think he only came into Parliament about 7 years ago. Before that, he spent his time prosecuting and convicting murderers and rapists. And he comes into politics to do things, not to be a celebrity.
Couldn't you at least credit Boris Johnson with Brexit? He ended our Brexit hell, didn't he?
Well, we voted for Brexit. That was it. Well, whoever was Prime Minister was going to have to take us out of that. I'm not certain he did a particularly good deal, but, we'll have to wait about 30 years for all the documents are eventually
published. Well, we were told there would never be a comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union. We were told he could never remove the backstop. It was in a treaty. All of it happened.
Well, no, our trade, the exports we're doing to the European Union are down by, I think, almost 10%. That's a real problem. That's cost votes, I mean, not just votes, but that's cost lots of jobs for people all over the country.
Of course, an aspect of that is the pandemic as well and supply chain issues. And in fact, Britain within the Eurozone has outperformed Germany, France and Italy over the last 6 years.
But the thing, I mean, when the virus erupted, I mean, Britain was the last country in Western Europe to go into lockdown. And thousands more people died because we put it off that
That's
long.
A very bold statement. I mean, a peer-reviewed study suggested cases were falling before each of the 3 national lockdowns. I mean, that's to be debated. Arguably, if we'd had Keir Starmer at number 10, we'd have had more lockdowns, more economic damage. I mean, don't forget, Keir Starmer called Freedom Day on the 19th of July reckless. How wrong he was. Your mates.
And if we had gone into lockdown quicker, thousands more people would be alive because of that. I mean, of course it's damaging for the economy. But I'd rather have the economy limping along a little bit than thousands of people dying.
Was Keir Starmer wrong to call Freedom Day on the 19th of July reckless?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
even though cases fell and the economy recovered?
But in all my time in politics, I don't think I've ever come across anybody as honest as Keir Starmer. I mean, literally.
Do you mean, for example, Ken, when he said to the media that there were a handful of aides at this event in Durham, which turned out to be in the teens? I think there were upwards of 15 people there. He changed his story twice. The Labour Party issued a statement denying that Angela Rayner was there. Turned out she was there. Lies upon lies upon lies. We can't call Boris Johnson a liar if we don't call Keir Starmer a liar too.
You can't call Keir Starmer a liar. The simple fact is he'd been working there in that constituency all day, and at the end of the day, he had a drink. I mean, it wasn't a party.
Well, he changed his story about the numbers. He changed his story about Angela Rayner.
I mean, if I may, I mean, you know, in a sense, Boris Johnson had a drink in the garden, at the, you know,
and he looked at a birthday cake for about 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly, and you know, so I don't know what the difference
Poor
is.
Poor old Rishi Sunak, who hasn't had a drink his whole life, got a fine.
At the end of the day, campaigning and having a drink, and then the end of the day working in the office and having a drink, there's not much difference. But one thing, if I may,
but you don't forget one other big fact here: the police have not taken any action against Keir. They did fine Boris.
But we do need to ask the question whether the Durham Police and Crime Commissioner was present at that event. And if so, there needs to be an independent investigation into whether or not improper influence was applied to the Chief Constable by the Police and Crime Commissioner there. And I think that's just a transparency thing, particularly given what happened to Boris.
If there's a chance of an inquiry damaging the Labour Party, Boris would have made certain there was one.
Well, he's not in a position to do that at the moment, sadly. But the one thing that I would say on leadership, and that is that a leader has to have character and spirit. And actually, that's what Boris has in bags. Reckless and negligent, maybe he is, but you've got to have that in a leader, and Keir Starmer doesn't have it.
This is what's gone wrong with our politics. It's all about celebrity crap now. I grew up in a world where Labour and Tory Prime Ministers all come into politics to do things to make life better. It wasn't about being a celebrity. They didn't want to keep going on television all the time.
But this is about character. Churchill, Patton, you know, all these people. You know, they had
Churchill
character.
didn't want to keep going on television. He wanted to actually run the country.
Well, I'll say here, actually, you were probably one of the first politicians that people would save with their first name recognition, Ken. So, you know, you started that ball going. And, you know, I've got a lot of time for you, Ken. We debated a lot of stuff after we did beat you twice in the elections at London Mayoralty. But, you know, and I know I've never heard you say anything positive about what Boris achieved, but we did, and even if it was delivering things, we've seen a mayor of London now who just hasn't been able to deliver what he's inherited. He's made a complete Horlicks of Crossrail. He hasn't been able to keep London moving in the way it was moving beforehand. And yes, it's about delivery. Good ideas, lots of people have them. But can you get those things done? Can you get a new route master on the streets of London? Can you get those bicycles there? Can you get the traffic reduced? Can you get improved quality on the air? Can you get Brexit done? And that's the magic of Boris Johnson. That was his political capital that he brought to those conundrums that defeated other politicians,
the real problem,
many other politicians.
The problem for the current mayor is he's got a government that isn't giving him billions of pounds.
Ken,
when I was mayor,
yeah.
I got so much money out that Labour government. I was able to do things, initiate projects.
Which is why we were broke by 2008.
I was about to say,
and that literally
gave it all to Ken.
Well, Ken, right up and I mean, the last thing I started was the Elizabeth line. You know.
Well, I'll say all that. We actually came in and negotiated with a Labour government, a coalition government, and a Conservative government, and Boris got money out of all of those governments. And that's what a mayor should do, and that's what you did, and that's what he did. And it's about politicians of your stature. Doesn't matter which party they come from, moving things forward and getting things done. And his record, like your record, has been about getting things done, which is why you're seen as successful
I don't
politician.
think that's true. I think it's about promoting himself and being famous globally. And literally, in all the times I had conversations or debates with him, and we had quite a lot during the 2 elections we both fought, he's never on top of the policy. Literally, he would turn up and his staff had given him a big file to read and study before he debated with me. He'd never bloody looked at it. You know?
I think that's common nowadays, Ken. You're an older generation of politician, and I take your hat off to you. And in fact, your colleagues in the House of Commons, when when you were mayor and before that as well, they didn't have to go off their notes to read a parliamentary question. That's a bad habit now. They don't seem to be capable of doing that. But I do think, you cannot be a leader without character. And you've got to have the character, the presentation skills, as well as deliver. If you can't do both of those, you're not going to win elections in order to be able to deliver the results at the end of it. That's the problem.
And his campaigning skills, second to none, from just across the political spectrum. A man who's won 2 mayoral elections, been elected as an MP, been elected as the leader of the Conservative Party, and delivered the biggest Conservative majority since 1987, I think. All of those achievements politically, Ken, I think will be recognised in time. Yes, all politicians have their failings, all politicians have their flaws, but his outweighed and still do, and I think he'll be a big beast in the House of Commons. I think you were saying, Henry, who else is there? He will still
carry
be
on doing anything in the House of Commons. He'll be looking for getting good income from something else.
Well, will he provoke a by-election, do you think, in Uxbridge, Colville?
Judging by his speech on the steps of Downing Street yesterday, I think he felt like a man who hasn't finished his job. It sounded like there were things he still wants to do in politics. I haven't discussed this with him. I've spoken to people in Number 10 today, actually. I've seen, what's the mood in there. Obviously, the mood is quite down today. But I think he's still got more to give.
In politics?
Yes.
Right, in Parliament. I mean, is a comeback something that you couldn't rule out?
Look, David Cameron said this. You want to have your best people. Your best people. When this Conservative Party faces the electorate, when it looks for those campaign assets, when a Prime Minister or a new leader gets into trouble and works out, well, how do I drive a campaign? How do I get the Conservative message? How do I find that new conservatism that reached across the divide, defeated Brexit, broke a red wall, generations of Labour supporters reached out to them? That was what Boris Johnson achieved.
But they've all gone back to Labour now.
Did Boris Johnson squander his 80-seat majority?
Yes.
I think that's going to be something that people have to look back on over a bit more time, because what more could he have achieved? The challenges he faced weren't planned. Except for Brexit, everything else has come out of nowhere. So 80-seat majority, get the big challenges done. I think the real disappointment is on adult social care and on levelling up. These were 2 great challenges of our time.
And rolling over to the sage scientists?
I think that the world rolled over. I think we had to take some of that advice on board, Mark.
But there was also a difficult. There was a difficult set of.
Early in the pandemic, we'll accept that the virus was an unknown quantity. But don't you think that when the true impact of lockdowns emerges, I think most of us are aware that we've paid a huge price, that will impact his legacy, Henry?
It will, but you can look back on these things and you can say, well, and if we're really objective about it, really unbiased and objective, you look at the information that he had and that the country had, and actually making the right set of decisions and making those decisions at the right time was incredibly difficult. And at the end of the day, how have we fared compared to other countries. People can go and look at that. But I think we did very well. When you come to balance healthcare with the economy and the longer-term interests of the country, I think he did very well, but he was a slow starter.
I mean, literally, he has achieved very, very little in terms of transforming our country. And the simple fact is, Boris came into politics to be a celebrity, not to manage things, not to be on top of detailed, in charge of things.
Vaccine rollout, Brexit, swift exit from the pandemic.
Indeed.
3 major achievements.
In 3 years. And it doesn't matter if he...
were going to happen, whoever was there.
But
that's easier said than done.
I think that's a bit disrespectful even for UK, because, look, if we look at Europe, France, where the far right are taking control of the centre of politics there. You know, the Italians' economic problems, the Germans' the economy is struggling. All across Europe, there are massive political issues. We had a leader who came in. We had a massive political issue around Brexit, which could have really torn this country apart. But Boris, as a leader, found us a way through that.
But their economies are growing better than ours.
We have the lowest rate of unemployment in generations. And our economy is still fundamentally sound.
And there are 24 nations in Europe, in the European Union, that have inflation at a higher rate than us. So,
hang on, we're about to hit 11%.
But what are they about to hit? They're already at 14 and so on. So if it's very easy to sit on this island and forget that there's a world out there. And actually, yes, we've struggled, and yes, there are problems, but actually, Boris has navigated us through luck or by judgment along the way through that route in such a way that we're actually not nearly as badly off as many of our neighbours. And that's what we've got to remember. He's actually done rather well and better than some of leaders in Europe.
Ken and Kulveer believe that Boris's time was up. You think he should have carried on and fought his corner, Henry. Can I ask each of you, before we finish this, for a rating out of 10 for Boris Johnson's premiership? Ken?
0. He's the worst Prime Minister of my life.
Oh, even from you, Ken, that's a bit churlish.
No, harsh. See, I have never known anyone in my life lie as much as Boris Johnson. And that literally is... You can't do that in politics.
OK, Henry, out of 10, a rating for Boris Johnson.
I'd love to split it into leadership, character, delivery and so on. But overall, I'll probably give him 6.5, 7 points.
Pretty generous, considering that you are a political rival, former leader of UKIP. And Kulveer, how about you?
We might be allies at some point.
On the big challenges, when it mattered, he provided the leadership and he dealt with the challenges that this country faced. And I think because of that, I'd give him probably a 7, 7.5 out of 10.
Brilliant. Well, Ken and Henry, thanks for making the trip in. Kulveer, stick around, because after this, we're going to speak to Boris Johnson's biographer, a man that knows him inside out. That's right, Tom Bauer, with a simple question. What's next for Boris? He's a young man. He's clearly not going anywhere. Also in the news agenda with my panel in the next hour, is Boris's downfall all down to Carrie? Plus, the Tory leadership contenders will be analysed by Britain's top body language expert, the remarkable Darren Stanton. And my Mark Meets guest is boxing legend Duke Mckenzie. A packed hour and 15 minutes. I'll see you in 2.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Big reaction to our big question, what is Boris Johnson's legacy? Charles says, hi, Mark, I agree with Henry Bolton. The irony is that Boris is being pushed out because of trivial issues blown out of all proportion. And his real crime is his net zero policies and lockdown and government handouts, which the mainstream media actually supported and wanted more. Couldn't agree with you more on that one, Charles. As a Conservative and Brexiteer, I agree with Ken on Boris, but for different reasons. And Steve says, Mark, can you ask Ken how Boris was supposed to achieve much when the country has been closed for nearly 2 years? And last but not least at this point, let's hear from Victoria. Ken Livingstone, Mark, has a short memory saying you can't have a premiership that lies. Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell, ring any bells? Caroline, thank you for that. The best bit of my show is when you get in touch. Thank you for those emails. We'll get to more shortly. Mark at gbnews.uk. Boxing legend Duke Mckenzie is with me in the studio after 10. And we've got another mini monologue coming at 10. That's right, my take at 10 is all about the National Trust, who are now fighting back on bonkers woke censorship. Find out more at 10. Well, lots to get through. The game is finally up for Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, and even though he's agreed to step down, he will guide the country until his successor takes over. But what's next for the blonde bombshell? Could he eventually revive his career in politics? Obviously, he'll make some money on the speaking circuit, but what is next for Boris? Joining me to discuss that is one of the men who knows him best, his biographer, investigative journalist, the author of Boris Johnson, the Gambler, Tom Bauer. Hi, Tom. Welcome to the show. What is next for Boris Johnson? Because he's still a young man.
Well, I think the next thing is for him to write his memoirs, which will be a bestseller for sure. I think the problem he faces is how candid he's going to be. Will he be as boring as David Cameron, or will he try, as John Major did, to try and admit some mistakes? I think he's got to go through a period of self-reflection and self-criticism to relaunch himself. I don't think Boris Johnson is the sort of man who's going to give up at all. He's still very young and still very ambitious. And I think he'll want to get his revenge against all those who brought him down. So from his point of view, there's a lot more to do and there's a lot more to achieve. And one of those achievements will be his resurrection. And the memoirs is part of that. So will he settle scores? I think we hope he will. Will he tell the truth about his own mistakes? I hope he will too. I think this is a moment for him to actually go into deep reflection about what he did right, and that's okay, but also what he did wrong. And I hope that'll take him, I would have thought, 6 to 8 months, because he's a very fast writer. And then we'll see what happens after that.
And of course, he needs to make some money. That will be his first priority, won't it, Tom?
Absolutely. I mean, that one of his great problems has been money, and all his life. Unfortunately for him, Carrie Johnson, his wife, spent much, much more than they had, not least on the ludicrous redecoration of their home. And now we hear £150,000 treehouse for Wilfred. Extraordinary. He's got very little money, even at all. He's still got to support one of his children, besides the 2 children with Carrie. I think money will be the least of his problems, frankly, because I think he'll be able to earn quite a lot very quickly. His problem will be, how does he present himself? His problem will be that for, obviously, his critics, he is a permanently damaged, disreputable man. For his admirers, they'll want to hear what he's got to say. I think he can't anymore do that sort of back-of-the-envelope speech. He'll have to do some very considered and purposeful speeches to reposition himself and show that he is a substantial politician. And that's going to mean concentration and some hard work. But I think he's up for that. He'd be a fool not to.
He's only been at number 10 for 3 years, Tom Bower, but I think he ranks up there with Thatcher and Churchill for significance in office, taking Britain out of the European Union. It doesn't get more constitutionally significant than that.
Well, I think that you're right. He did achieve that. And I thought Ken Livingstone in the previous segment was hilarious. Of course, Ken speaks as the man who was defeated twice by Boris in a Labour city. So the humiliation clearly still rankles with Ken Livingstone. But I think Brexit was an achievement. I think he did very well considering through COVID. I think he set up some good institutions to try and level up to get Britain's science industry moving despite the European problems. In my view, his real handicap were appalling civil servants, and that was not his fault. What was his fault were his appointments very often, his lack of focus, and that is partly down to COVID, there's no doubt about that. And also, I fear, because of his wife, Carrie Johnson, who interfered in the most dreadfully destructive way, and not only caused the departure of Dominic Cummings, but of course prompted Dominic Cummings to wreak vengeance against Boris, which in the end was the beginning of Boris's downfall. And Carrie, I think there's a lot to answer for that.
Your book about Boris is called The Gambler because the predominant theme of Boris Johnson's life, as you've pointed out in that brilliant tome, is that he likes to roll the dice. He very often comes up smelling of roses. Do you think that his party will regret the gamble of getting rid of him?
Unfortunately not. I've got to tell you that, Mark. I think it got to the stage in the last few months, especially after the Owen Paterson affair, that the party was on a downwards trajectory, and we can't ignore Tiverton. What I'm surprised about in the analysis of Tiverton, that nobody has drawn a parallel with the by-election in Orpington in 1962. Everyone's far too young, probably, to remember it, except people like me. In Orpington, a man called Eric Lubbock won an astounding victory for the Liberal Democrats, and 2 years later that led to the Tory government's fall and a Labour government for 13 years. And I think that is in danger of happening after Tiverton. And I don't think Boris had the formula to rebuild the Tory party quickly in the next 2 years. He'd lost the support of too many people because of Partygate, because of the very, very malicious press against him, the BBC and Sky and all the others. So he couldn't get a hold anymore. He'd lost the control over the machine. So I don't think that we should regret that. If you want a Labour government, then you probably would have wanted Boris to stay on. We have a chance now, if you're a Tory, to rebuild the Tory brand and rebuild the government and give Keir Starmer a very, very good run for his money and hopefully beat him. But it's going to be a tough fight because the party will be inevitably divided. And one of the things that Boris was so good at before was rallying support. He was very good at unifying people and shivving them along, like Coulvier before me just now. And he lost that ability. He lost so many of the qualities that got him the leadership in 2019. And one's got to ask why did he lose the bonhomie, the charm, the drive, the vision and everything? And that all seemed to desert him. So I think it's a period now, as far as he's concerned, if he wants a future, and he is ambitious, of rebuilding himself, of actually pulling in the assets he has, natural assets, and thinking what went wrong and trying to repair the damage that he's caused. And, the truth is that Churchill managed it. Gladstone had 4 governments. He was thrown out and then came back. So I don't think it's right to write off Boris Johnson, but it's up to him whether he's got the drive and the ambition to do it.
Do you anticipate a possible return to politics for Boris Johnson, Tom?
I don't think he's going to leave politics. I'd be surprised if he resigns from the Commons. I don't think he's going to do a Theresa May and sit there fuming in the back benches. I don't think he's going to do any destructive damage. On the contrary, if he's clever and he wants a future in politics, and I believe he does want a future still in politics, he will do his best to support his successor and show that he is a team player. You know, that's the whole thing about Boris Johnson. What he did learn at Eton and previous schools was to be part of the team. And the wall game, which I think was very pivotal at Eton of forming his character, did depend on the team, on driving people forward. And he did that very, very well in City Hall. That talent seems to have escaped him when he got to Whitehall for all sorts of reasons. But I think he can resurrect that, rebuild that, and be a team leader and support the Tory government, show that he's loyal, and I think slowly but surely, from his point of view, he will be able to rebuild himself for the future.
But could he return to the cabinet, do you think? Is it conceivable that he could potentially re-enter government in the next 5 to 10 years?
The trouble with Boris is I don't think he'd want to be a minister under another prime minister. That's the problem. He'd always want to be the top dog. And so he'd want to be the leader. He'd want to take everyone behind him. So I don't think it's a matter of being a minister, and that would in any case constrain all his money-making activities. He'll wait and see. The party will clearly go through a period of rebuilding and all the rest of it. And he hopes, I guess, at some stage, they'll come and ask him to return, just as they did to General de Gaulle. I mean, there are parallels in history and precedents in history where discredited and deposed politicians have featured and come back because they have improved themselves and the public believe that they are the people who can save them again, just as Boris saved the Tory party from annihilation in 2019.
Very briefly, Tom, because your book is an illustrious tome, carefully researched, I'm going to finish with a very gossipy question. Do you think, knowing Boris, that his relationship with Carrie Johnson will survive?
I don't. I don't say it from any pleasure or any insight that I know about him, but I think that Carrie has been one of the agents of Boris's destruction in Downing Street. And I think that as he reflects on it and thinks how she interfered in all those different policies, whether it was about agriculture or about
green issues,
it won't work, in my view, in the long term.
And on that note, the book is a cracker. It's called The Gambler. It's always a privilege to have you on the programme. Do come in when you've published your latest tome about Meghan Markle. Look forward to that one, the remarkable Tom Bower. Lots more to come. Keep it. Mark Dolan tonight in the news agenda. Is Boris's downfall due to Carrie? Plus a body language expert on the new leadership hopefuls. And my Mark Meets guest is the boxer Duke Mckenzie. But next, another mini monologue, My Take at 10. It's about the woke National Trust. You won't want to miss it. See you in 2.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good evening. It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan. Tonight, my Mark Meets guest is boxing legend Duke Mckenzie. Also in the news agenda with my panel is Boris Johnson's downfall all Carrie's fault? Plus, the Tory leadership contenders will be analysed by Britain's top body language expert. That's right, Britain's official TV lie detector, Darren Stanton. And we've got tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30. Reaction to Beer Starmer. That's right, Sir Beer Starmer off the hook in Durham. Is it a right royal stitch-up? And after this, my take at 10, I'll be dealing with the woke National Trust. You won't want to miss it. I'm not pulling my punches. First, the headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak's leadership campaign has attracted a big-name supporter. Former Conservative Party chairman Oliver Dowden says he'll back the former Chancellor as he's unquestionably the best person to beat Labour. Earlier, the former Chancellor launched his campaign on social media using the slogan, "Ready for Rishi." He says he wants to restore trust. Prominent Tory backbencher Tom Tugendhat has also declared that he'll run. New Education Secretary James Cleverly told GB News there'll be plenty of decent candidates.
Personal circumstances mean that I won't be putting myself forward, but I'm also confident that we have a pool of talent which will enable us to choose someone with fantastic experience, whoever that might be.
Sir Keir Starmer did not break lockdown rules last year. Those are the findings of Durham Police. The Labour leader and his deputy Angela Rayner had promised to step down if they'd been fined. Video showed Sir Keir drinking beer and eating curry with colleagues during a visit to Durham, but police say they did obey the law. Speaking at a press conference earlier, Sir Keir said truth and integrity matter.
People said to me I was taking a risk by saying I would step down if I was fined. But it was never about that. For me, it was a matter of principle. It shouldn't be controversial to say that those who make the law can't break the law. But we have to set the bar far higher than that.
Police say the man accused of killing Japan's ex-leader has a grudge against a group he thought Shinzo Abe was a part of. The former Prime Minister was shot from behind while giving a speech at a political event. He later died in hospital. Investigators say the 41-year-old suspect is in custody and has admitted to using a homemade gun in the attack. The Metropolitan Police has a new commissioner. Sir Mark Rowley replaces Dame Cressida Dick, who announced that she was leaving the role back in February. Sir Mark is a former counter-terrorism officer who left the force 4 years ago. Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says he's the best person for the job.
A series of appalling scandals have not only exposed deep cultural problems within the Met, but have contributed to a crisis of confidence in London's police service. Sir Mark has made clear to me that he's determined to be a reforming commissioner.
And Cameron Norrie has lost his semi-final match against Novak Djokovic at Wimbledon. The 26-year-old British #1 was defeated by 3-1 on centre court. He's only the fourth British man to ever reach the last four at the All England club. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Big stories, big guests, big opinions. In the news agenda with my panel, is Boris Johnson's downfall all Carrie's fault? Plus, the Conservative leadership contenders will be analysed by Britain's top body language expert, the TV lie detector himself, Darren Stanton. Plus, another topical game show. And tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp. Lots to react to, including Keir Starmer off the hook for that Durham bash. Is it a right royal stitch-up? Reaction to that will come from my panel. Reality star and TV presenter and model Declan Doyle, pro-Boris commentator Sophie Corcoran, and former top advisor to Boris Johnson, Kulveer Ranger. And my Mark Meets guest is in the studio. I've shaken hands with the great man, the hand that has done a lot of damage. His, not mine. Boxing legend Duke Mckenzie tells his incredible story. But first, it's time for my Take at 10. There's been an outbreak of common sense at the National Trust. The organisation which looks after some of our greatest public buildings has a new chief who said we cannot rewrite history based upon a political agenda. René Olivieri, who took over as chairman in February, has said in an interview that whilst we are entitled to raise questions about the history of the Trust's 200-plus buildings, new views cannot eclipse other perspectives. In other words, you can't rewrite history. Well done him. For the last few years, the National Trust has been hell-bent on apologising for the entirety of our history, with trigger warnings and self-flagellating signs about our terrible past. Signs everywhere, it drives me mad. Even Winston Churchill's family home, Chartwell, has been burdened with, yes, yet more signs, linking it to colonial rule. Now, slavery, the most evil act in history, is not exclusive to these shores. Every great ancient city was built on the back of it, and it was, unfortunately, how the world economy functioned for centuries, and it must never be repeated again. Although, of course, it is, with devices like this smartphone and £2 T-shirts produced on the back of human exploitation and death. A fact lost on woke hypocrites tweeting about our crimes of the past on devices that represent crimes being played out as we speak. What about all of those smug people cruising around in electric cars like they're such wonderful human beings, with not a thought about the children spending 14 hours in wet sand in Africa looking for minerals like lithium that power their lovely vehicles? Slavery is an appalling stain on all of our histories, but Britain was the most proactive force in ending this evil crime. We must teach children about slavery at school, absolutely, but it shouldn't be the exclusive lens through which we tell our story. If I was thinking about what kind of sign to put up outside Winston Churchill's home, I wouldn't be banging on about colonialism. For me, it would simply say, "Here once lived Winston Churchill, the man who stopped the worst murderer in history, Adolf Hitler." That's good enough for me. This intervention from the new boss of the National Trust is welcome. It's one in the eye to those who will stop at nothing to talk this country down. I was in an engineering museum recently, and they managed to link an early steam engine with our colonial crimes of the past. Do me a favour, it's a bloody engine. Can't we just look at it, enjoy it, and marvel at its ingenuity, rather than receiving a political lecture? Bloody signs everywhere, I'm sick of it. I believe that the backlash against this Britain-hating woke culture is in full flight. And it looks like we may once again be able to trust the National Trust. The signs, on this occasion, are positive. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport, business and beyond. Tonight, boxing legend Duke Mckenzie. Duke is a three-weight world champion, having held the IBF flyweight title, the WBO bantamweight title and the WBO junior featherweight title. At regional level, he held the British and European flyweight titles and the British featherweight title too. He's won it all. He went on to have a successful career as a boxing commentator on ITV and Box Nation. And he still packs a punch, and I'm delighted to say that a true British sporting legend, Duke Mckenzie Mbe, joins me now. Hi, Duke.
Hi, Mark.
Congratulations on the MBE.
Thank you very much.
Did you receive it from Charles or the Queen?
Princess Anne.
Oh, I love Anne.
Yeah, she's great. She's great. It was a packed house, and there was obviously other people receiving different awards. And I watched her for about a good half an hour before I got in to do my MBE, before I got mine. and she knew everybody's name. She knew where they'd come from. She made a real point in asking people how their journey. She just made conversation. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, for me, she's cut from the same cloth as her mother. She's humble, she's sensible, sense of duty, no nonsense, and a dry wit.
Yeah, very much so, yeah. It was a lovely day. All my kids were there, and it was a very proud moment for me. And, they gave me an MBE. I'm honoured.
Can you remember what she said to you?
Yeah, she asked me my name, and she said to me how proud she felt for me. And this was a big day for me and my family. I should enjoy the occasion, so which we did. It was fabulous. Getting all dressed up, going to Windsor Castle and receiving an MBE. Fantastic.
Remarkable story.
Yep.
Let's talk about your incredible career.
Yes.
Why were you so good at adapting to different weights?
Sometimes you have to ride off with somebody else's confidence until yours kicks in. And I had a brother, Dudley, who gave me just about everything I needed to become a successful professional boxer. So, I had a great manager also in Mickey Duff, and had a great coach in Colin Smith. So this little team that was put together helped me to achieve incredible things in the professional sport of boxing. And, British champion, European champion, world champion. I don't really know. Sometimes I pinch myself, Mark, because I look back on my career and I'm one of the real lucky ones. I really am. So I've had a privileged career. I've worked really hard to get to where I got. And I suppose at the end result is, I can still walk in a straight line.
For sure. Was it graft or was it talent?
More graft than talent. I come from a big boxing family. My elder brother Clinton went to the 1976 Olympic Games representing Great Britain. My brother Dudley was a hugely successful amateur boxer. Went unbeaten for like 8 years, went to the World Junior Championships. And Clinton also was a British and a European champion. So my role models in this sport, really, were just always in touching distance. And I just watched what my brother's done and tried to emulate what they done. And I ended up going one step further. But I've always been quite a humble guy, and I've always thought to myself, I'm never going to be bigger than the sport. And I've always said Dudley had always said to me, even as a world champion, you're beatable. So when defeat did come my way, I always knew there was going to be a way back for me because, you're champion for that night. You've got to beat the guy that's in front of you, so you're world champion for that night. And then it's just like the hungry wolves are chasing you down, and they're going to get you eventually. Nobody's unbeatable, not even Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson. Nobody gets out of this with an unblemished record. Yeah. There are very few boxers that retire undefeated. So for me to say, or sit here, I should say, as a 3-division world champion, I consider it a privilege and an honour.
And what gave you over the edge in the ring over those that you beat?
I would say I'm very tenacious, incredibly fit, determined, skillful to a point. But a lot of it, believe it or not, is luck, because you've got to turn up on the night. Psychologically, mentally, you've got to be prepared, and your preparation doesn't start on the night, it starts months in advance. Boxers walk a very, very fine line, and you need the right sort of support. So I had the right support. I had a great coach in Colin Smith. I had a fantastic manager in Mickey Duff. And with Dudley by my side, I really felt I couldn't lose.
So take me through a really tough day of training. What time does the alarm go off?
4 a.m. You get up at 4 a.m, you do like a 6-8 mile run, back to bed for a couple of hours.
You do that Rocky thing where you wear loads of layers?
The whole shebang, yeah. I mean, listen, making weight is the part and parcel of any professional boxer's life. And you've got to make weight, you've got to dry out, you've got to not eat this and eat that. And it was different in my day. Today you've got nutritionists, you've got dietitians, you've got people that will help you make weight in a safe way. But in my way, it was just
starvation?
Yeah, starvation, plastic bag, tracksuits, hoodies, you name it, and go out and do your run and just starve yourself and make weight.
How did the family get involved in boxing?
My older brother, Clinton, his best friend at school was a guy called Frankie Lucas, and he introduced Clinton to boxing. And then my other brother started, and then Dudley started, and then I started eventually. My career was the opposite of theirs, because as an amateur, I was very, very poor, but as a professional, I excelled.
Yeah, why is that, do you think?
Again, I had a great manager in Mickey Duff, who was what Alex Ferguson was to Man United. Mickey Duff was that to the boxing fraternity, certainly the late Mickey Duff. He's gone, God rest his soul. But he gave me one of the most valuable things that you can give anybody, and that was his time. He gave me more time than I could have ever dreamt for or ever hoped for. And he took me all over the world, learning me my trade. And then even when I lost him major title fights, he never turned his back on me. He just kept taking me to another level because he had that much belief.
And he took you from a fairly average amateur into being a top pro.
I have the worst amateur credentials of any professional world boxing.
Why did he take you?
I was very, very cheeky, very, very tenacious, and I hounded the hell out of him. That's the truth. I used to ring him up long distance in America, and he'd call him collect, and he'd have to answer the phone, and all this went on for months. But he liked me, and I knew he liked me, and he saw something in me which nobody else did, fortunately.
Yeah.
And he stuck with me, and I sit here as a 3-division champion. So
and he obviously knew that you wanted it.
Yeah, well, like I said, I was very tenacious. I used to ring him pretty much every day at his office. Sometimes when he wasn't even there, I'd still call up or even turn up, and I'd wait for him like a little lapdog at his office to turn up because he used to live in Los Angeles. Yeah. So I'd go to his office at Wardour Street, wait for him there. Most days he never showed up, but then I'd just wait until he did, and then it just went on for quite some time until in the end I just had such an effect on him. He went, well, yeah, there's a contract, sign it. Pretty
amazing.
much.
And anything he told you to do, you did it.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much.
You put in the hard yards because you must have known other talented boxers who fell by the wayside because they just wouldn't, put in the hours.
Oh, yeah. Listen, countless. My gym was packed with talent. Guys like Frank Bruno, my brothers obviously were in the gym, and plenty of guys in the gym that never made it because they didn't have the dedication. You have to be dedicated to the core, and you have to be, I'd say, borderline obsessed with your job.
So you're not going out, you're not having loads of girlfriends, that kind of thing?
Never went out, never had loads of girlfriends, bed at 6 o'clock on a summer's evening. Some of the things I used to do were like just borderline, probably, pretty crazy, I'd say. But, it brought me a lot of success, so I've got no complaints.
What were those crazy things?
Like I say, going to bed at 6 o'clock on a summer's evening, getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning, doing like an 8-mile run on
eating odd food at God knows what time.
Eating next to nothing, making weight. But these are the sacrifices.
And then when you were eating, what was it? It was like 10 fried eggs and things like that?
Oh, sure. I mean, listen, I could put on a stone overnight. Once you've had the official weigh-in, you just eat constantly. I'd set my clock every 4 hours to eat and make sure I just filled myself up and bang the weight back on.
What about being in the ring? Is there a fear? Are you afraid?
Always fearful. Not necessarily of being hurt. I think more of the humiliation of losing in a fight. That's quite crippling. And I think out of my 3 World Championship fights, or my 3 world title fights I had, I think losing my 2nd World Championship was probably the worst for me. Yeah. I got destroyed in like 2 minutes, 10 seconds of the first round at the Royal Albert Hall on a Saturday night. I got ruined. And that was... I never went out my front door for about 6-8 weeks after the fight. Just totally humiliated. And to face people that I know and love, that was quite painful. But the only way back for me was to be successful again. So Dudley said to me, listen, little man, as he would call me, he said, there's another belt out there for you. You just got to go out and get it. Rededicate yourself and go out and get it. So I did exactly what he told me to do. I went out there and Mickey Duff got me another world title opportunity, and which I took. And my career went up from strength to strength.
Did you make a good living from it?
I done okay. Did I make a good living? Ask my ex-wife.
Yes,
that's
sure,
life.
She's enjoying the trappings of it now.
Yeah.
And you weren't tempted for that one last fight that so many boxers.
Yeah, I made an aborted return to the ring, but then I realised that I didn't have it anymore, and life goes on. But you have to go through these processes because all fighters do.
And you don't know unless you try, right?
You don't know unless you try. And let's get it right. People think that everybody can be like Anthony Joshua or Frank Bruno and make millions and millions of pounds. For every one that makes it to the top of the sport, very few actually make a good financial living out of it. You can count as far as on one hand. A lot of boxers today, not a lot, but there are quite a few boxers today which are actually suffering as a direct result from their sport. With mental health, with poor health. And I'm actually involved with an organisation called the Ringside Charitable Trust, who are an organisation put together by Paul Fairweather. He surrounded himself with a team, and they're trying to raise monies for a care home for retired boxers that are falling on hard times. And believe it or not, there are quite a few boxers that are suffering as we speak, homeless probably, drink dependency, drug dependency, and don't have anywhere to turn to or there's no help. The top promoters aren't getting involved. You know, the real big ones, like your Barry Hearns of the world, like your Frank Warrens of the world, they're not putting their name to this. They've almost washed their hands of it. Why? I don't know. But we're trying to help this organisation, raise the profile of this organisation. We've recently been to Florida, where there was an event put on by the Moth Foundation in conjunction with Kids Beating Cancer and also the Ringside Charitable Trust to raise the profile of the sport, to raise monies for a much-needed care home for specifically for retired boxers that have fallen on hard times.
What a brilliant cause, the Ringside Charitable Trust. And you're involved with Mind as well as an ambassador.
Yep, I am.
You lost your brother to suicide.
I did, yes.
Devastating. And therefore a very important cause for you.
Yeah, I will probably never get over the loss of my brother Dudley. We were more than brothers. And it's something that I have to live with every day. But I have to use that in a much more positive way and try and give back. I don't see myself as a boxing coach or promoter or anything like that. I like doing the job that I do as an ambassador for the Mind organisation and also helping as an ambassador for the Ringside Charitable Trust. Because I say there are a lot of boxers, as we speak, which are absolutely desperate and need help. So I'm giving my all for this organisation to help them raise the profile so they can get enough monies together, so they can get this care home up and running off the ground. And with the help of Paul Fairweather and Dave Harris, it's going to become a success.
And those care homes are very important for the boxing community because, let's be honest, the body and the brain takes a bit of a hammering.
Yeah, listen, it's not croquet. It is a hurt business, unfortunately. And but you know, there are boxers which will get damaged, like a Michael Watson, as an example. You know, Mark Dolan is another boxer that I know. Spencer Oliver is another guy who had a tragic injury in the sport. But these guys have got a lot of support now from different organisations or from the Ringside Charitable Trust, I should say, and are trying to put their lives back together with their help.
And of course, Muhammad Ali, I think, suffered from cognitive issues towards the end of his life.
Unfortunately.
Probably related to the sport.
Yeah, probably related to the sport.
Dudley, of course, what a contribution he made to your career, and he was your brother, which is a double blow.
Yeah, I don't really know how I survived it, but I did. But, my best days are ahead of me. This is what I keep saying to myself. Yeah. I've got a lot of time for people, and I'm the kind of guy, if I go shopping on a Saturday, if I go shopping with my wife on a Saturday, if I go missing down one aisle, I'll just start talking to somebody. That's just how I am. Because you don't know if that person spoke to anybody for the whole day. Yeah. So one of the gifts my brother gave me was, make time for people. Give people a little bit of time because, they might not have spoken to somebody. You might not have spoken to somebody all day. And then you just give them that little 10 minutes and then you just don't know where it's going to take him or them.
Well, I'm so grateful that you've given us your time tonight. It's such an inspiring story, an amazing career, an amazing life, so much more to do. Let's give a plug to the gym, which is, thank God, open after lockdown. What's it called?
The Jukebox. The Jukebox.
Oh, perfect. The Jukebox, right?
Yeah.
D-U-K-E.
D-U-K-E.
Where is it?
South Croydon.
Right, I might go down there and pump some iron. I could do with beefing up a little bit.
Come
you
down
willing to train me? You be my coach?
I'll be your coach, 100%.
You get me up at 4 in the morning?
I'll get you up at 3 in the morning.
There you go. Cook me some steaks.
Absolutely.
A few fried eggs.
And more eggs, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Well, that would do it. The Ringside Charitable Trust, do check out the amazing work they do. My thanks to the amazing Duke Mckenzie Mbe. So much more to come. We've got the papers at 10:30. Reaction from my panel to Keir Starmer off the hook in relation to Durham Police and the Beergate scandal. Is it a right royal whitewash? And after this, is Boris Johnson's downfall all down to Carrie? Find out in 2.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Boris Johnson wasn't the only Johnson regularly hitting the headlines. During his time as Prime Minister, his wife Carrie has been accused by some of contributing to his downfall. The couple were at the centre of the makeover scandal at their flat in Downing Street. Then Lord Ashcroft suggested that her behaviour was even preventing Boris from leading Britain as effectively as the voters deserved. Most recently, there was speculation about Boris speaking with aides to secure his wife 2 top jobs, something which Downing Street didn't refute. Plus, she is alleged to have pushed for Boris's green agenda and his war against toxic masculinity. So, was it all Carrie's fault? What do you think, Sophie?
No, you know what? When I saw this, I was like, why are we talking about Carrie? She's irrelevant. The people whose fault it is one, the media, and we know that. I mean, their obsession with Boris since the day he came in has been really significant, and they've got him out over the most stupid of things. And the Paul Brands of the world are, going to be fetishising their own ego.
ITV journalist.
Yep, because they've managed to destroy a Prime Minister and pull our country into the gutter. The other thing that is just the entire nation, the institutions. I mean, look at Beergate today. I mean, that's a scandal. Come off it.
Well, we're gonna discuss that when we do the papers. But Sophie, on Sunday, I called it that Boris had to go.
I know, I saw that.
You watched that, and thank you for watching. And I got so many emails from people saying that they blamed Carrie, that it was Boris Johnson was distracted by this woman's green agenda, her woke credentials. And even Tom Bower, who's written the biography of Boris, just told me in the last hour that he doesn't think that relationship will survive because she was part of his downfall.
Well, here's the thing, that a lot of the problems that come from Boris, the green agenda, and that is from Carrie, but his ultimate downfall was because of, these trivial things that the media have dug up. He's not been able to focus on the things that matter because he's worrying about Beergate, wallpaper, Partygate.
But you can't dismiss the green agenda. I mean, we've got green levies on fuel, which is increasing the cost of petrol by 25%.
Indeed, but don't forget, that is not the reason why he was brought down. I'm saying, she is responsible for a large amount of his terrible policies, and traditionally I wouldn't criticise the wife or a husband of a Prime Minister because he's wrong, but she has inserted herself into policy, and policy that is frankly unconservative. But if you're answering the actual question, the reason why he was brought down was because, all of the Chris Pincher debacle because of the media, not with Carrie. But obviously Carrie hasn't had a good influence either.
Declan Doyle, is criticism of Carrie Johnson sexism?
I mean, look, I think as a society we're quick to blame women, and I don't feel like she should be blamed for this. It's Boris's wrongdoing. It's his mistakes. He needs to take accountability for what he's done. I don't really think she's to blame, and I think I commend her for if she did make him step down because it's a good thing.
Do you think it's inappropriate for a partner to influence their husband or wife professionally?
I know, not really, because I think they have their best interests at heart. They love them dearly, so I think they're helping them make.
Didn't elect her, though. That's the problem. If she wants to get involved in policy, then she ought to stand for election.
Right.
I think this is why a lot of people were angry at Gary. You know, it wasn't just a sneaky, but she's a large part of the party. She had a job at CCHQ. She wasn't just a nobody. She had a role to play.
Yeah, as his wife as well.
What do you think, Declan? I mean, does one consult one's husband or wife about professional issues?
Yeah, I think so, definitely, yeah. I think, you know, they're their rock, they're ride or die, so they have to have some input into their professionalism life as well.
Yeah, so even if let's say your partner is in a completely different industry, you're still going to offload on them.
Yeah.
And then they might offer ideas and suggestions.
Yeah, they should be your number one
area of expertise. Is there not a conflict between that and a democratically elected politician, that that the partner is unelected but influencing the boss?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but I think what she's done, if she has influenced that at all, I think is a positive in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and perhaps you back the Green agenda, so that might be a positive for you as well. I mean, Kulveer, that's the million-dollar question, the carry factor. Is it unfair to focus on this woman in this way?
It's completely unfair. I agree with Declan. You know, your partner loves you. That they care for you and they want to see the best for you, and you share a lot of your challenges, whatever they may be, professional, personal, with them. They're the person who's always around you. But the fixation here, and the media's fixation with Carrie, was, I think, went into the pale. It wasn't appropriate. Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. All the MPs, all of them have partners and wives. Are we going to do this with every one of them? Are we going to go through what their partners are doing and influencing their thoughts on policy? I don't think that works. You know, First Ladies, supporters. Dennis was a great supporter for Margaret Thatcher. Blair had, his wife Cherie. There was a bit of fixation with her as well. Samantha Cameron had a way of having quite a bit of poise around how she was.
She was very dignified. Yeah. Philip May was pretty discreet.
Yeah. But I think there was a level of unfair coverage of.
But isn't
Carrie.
the difference with Philip May, Dennis Thatcher, and Samantha Cameron that they are not political campaigners in the way that Carrie Johnson is? We know that she's preoccupied with environmental issues.
Well, I think that's her life, and she's entitled to do that. And she shares her life with her husband. That was their relationship.
Isn't Boris notorious for trying to keep whoever he's currently shagging happy?
I couldn't possibly comment on that.
Isn't that his Achilles heel?
Is that not the idea, though? Is that are you supposed to upset them? I'm pretty sure you're supposed to.
Isn't that Boris's weak spot though? He's like, yes, dear, okay. If you want me to do that, I'll put that through into statute as long as I stay in your good books.
She had him firmly in her pocket, shall we say? And I think that's where a lot of the criticism from the public comes from. It's not that she had any influence; it's that she had far too much influence.
Well, there you go. It has just turned 10:30, so it's time for tomorrow's papers and, of course, full panel reaction as well. So where shall we start? Let's have a look at what we've got. The I newspaper, first of all, and here's their front page. Race is on. Sunak starts Tory leader scramble. Three days after launching cabinet mutiny against Boris Johnson, the former Chancellor announces his campaign to become PM and warns the public that early tax cuts are unlikely. He will face his successor, Nadhim Zahawi, Penny Mordaunt, Sajid Javid, Tugendhat and Baker, with dozens of other Tories considering their own bids for power. Moving on now to the Mirror. Excuse me. Dec anguish as his brother dies. The most shocking story. TV star Declan Donnelly is grieving the loss of his brother Dermot, who has very sadly died at the age of 55. Really, really awful story. Also on the front page of the Mirror, Keir is in the clear. We'll discuss that shortly. Keir Starmer cleared of any wrongdoing in relation to the Beergate scandal up in Durham. The Daily Mail. As Starmer opens door to coalition of chaos, voters rage over Boris's toppling. Red wall backlash at Tory traitors. Treacherous Tory MPs faced a fierce backlash last night as Sir Keir Starmer opened the door to a coalition of chaos. Voters in red wall seats who swept the Tories to a landslide election victory less than 3 years ago accused regicidal MPs of stabbing Boris Johnson in the back. Also on the front page, Little Rishi, the boy who would be PM. And there you go. The PR campaign for Rishi Sunak is in full flow. The Times now. Don't listen to fairy tales. Sunak tells Tory voters. Former Chancellor launches leadership bid. Rishi Sunak warned Tories not to believe fairy tale promises of higher spending and lower taxes from his rivals as he became the first heavyweight contender to launch his leadership campaign. Also, grudge match. Nick Kyrgios will vie to be Wimbledon champion with Novak Djokovic, who defeated Cameron Norrie of Britain in their semi-final yesterday. It won't be boring, will it, that final on Sunday? The Telegraph next. Tax cuts must wait, says Sunak, the serious candidate. And children told not to play in the sun during heatwave. And last but not least for now, The Guardian, let battle begin. Rishi Sunak launches bid to be Prime Minister with up to 15 candidates expected to join the race. Declan Doyle, who do you like the look of? Are you a member of the Conservative Party?
No.
No.
I'm not.
There you go. I was reading between the lines there.
Yes, no worries.
Who's the least bad option for you?
I don't know. I think everyone's got a good chance now to prove themselves and win us over. I mean, I'm just happy that it's not Boris Johnson at the moment. So that's where I'm at.
You know, it won't be a Prime Minister that anyone's voted for. Technically, of course, it's a government that a majority of people in the constituencies did. But they will be our Prime Minister. So what would you like to hear from them?
I'd like to hear that they have our interests at heart. I feel like with Boris Johnson, he's charming and lovable in a way, but I don't feel like he put his selfish needs before others and before maybe us as a country. And I'd like to hear from the future Prime Minister that they have our best interests at heart and actually come through with those promises.
What do you think about this message of tough love on the economy for Rishi Sunak? I mean, I quite like the idea of a politician that tells us things we don't want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it shows a bit of honesty, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about this, Kulveer? Because we are emerging from the biggest economic shock since the Second World War, and I do like this message from Rishi Sunak that we've got to cut our cloth and that we've got to balance the books and get Britain on the road to economic recovery.
Well, we're going to see the true colours of this politician and what he actually believes in and what kind of conservatism he actually believes in, because it appears the blockage that there was between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson was that Boris wanted the economy to have tax cuts, to look at how we could get growth going. And I know there was a long-term economic plan being developed to come out within a few days. Rishi was not on board with that. Now, he's got to win over, apart from the public, apart from the Conservative Party members, his fellow Conservative MPs, who are also looking for those Conservative principles of tax cuts, a low-tax economy, growth for business, and how is Rishi going to balance those requirements with what he's saying right now? So it's an early positioning of him, but it'll be interesting how all the other 12, 15 runners and riders place themselves when it comes to the agenda of the economy.
Well, you can certainly perhaps look at Margaret Thatcher's sort of tax-cutting agenda in 1987, but what we got from Thatcher in 79 was some tough medicine, high interest rates. She controlled the supply of money to get on top of inflation. She fought a battle with the unions. So maybe a bit of toughness and a tough message is the way to go.
I think you're absolutely right, Mark. But the question here is Rishi tested enough? Has he had any tough battles? Yes, he went through COVID, but really, that was a collective decision of Cabinet and the Prime Minister around how we dealt with COVID.
Although was he not an important limiting factor on Boris's profligacy at number 10? Was he not the tempering figure who said, no, look, the country can't afford it?
Well, I think there was the issue of how we afforded to get through COVID. And I think some of those policies are now looking at, was the Treasury too quick? Did it really think through some of the approaches it made? But now when it came to the difficult decisions, we didn't really see Rishi move. We've seen the Bank of England, the monetary policy that the Bank of England, quantitative easing through the Bank of England, inflation, how it's being managed. A lot of this is done without Treasury influence. Now was the time where we really needed to see what a chance there would be made of to recover the economy. I think at that point, Rishi checked out.
See, I don't think, because I think that there are many employees in this country, public sector workers, private sector, who deserve a pay rise. Inflation's a nightmare for so many people, and lots of industries and indeed groups, professional groups like police officers, have been neglected for years. But my argument is now is not the time, because if you have these pay rises, they will only be achieved through borrowing, which adds further to the national debt, which is to be payable by future generations. And of course, we know that it will spike inflation. So by refusing tax cuts, isn't Rishi Sunak showing responsibility there? Because tax cuts would come from borrowing too, Sophie.
No. One of the biggest contributors to the cost of living crisis we have at the minute is the energy bills and the fuel prices. Well, a large proportion of the fuel costs goes to the government through VAT and through fuel duty, and at least 25% of our energy costs also go to the government in fuel levies. Cut them. People are struggling. People can't afford to spend. because they're not cutting taxes. We're sending billions to Ukraine. We're sending, millions abroad to the UN. But we can't enable our people to heat their homes or get to work because we're taxing them so much. It's not coming from the greedy energy companies or the greedy petrol companies. It's coming from our greedy government. And it's, the reason why people are in poverty is because they're refusing to cut taxes. If they wanted to help us, they would, and they'd do it simply. And maybe you can ask the reason why they haven't done it is because they want to get cars off of the road. But for me, Rishi has been one of possibly the most dreadful chancellors I've lived under. And I know, obviously, I haven't been here too long. All he has done is spend, spend, spend and spend. And we've tried to copy what Labour have done in order to get out of the financial crisis. You cannot tax your way out of debt. You have to grow your way out of it. And you cannot grow your way out of it if you are taxing people into poverty so they can't spend. All you do is end up taxing yourself into a recession and larger economic debt as a result. We need to cut taxes. That's the fundamental purpose of Conservatives, and I'm a Conservative, and I tell you now, I will not vote for a candidate that does not promise to cut taxes.
And I hear what you're saying, and I completely agree, because there's a pinch point at which taxes start to impact economic growth, which is a race to the bottom for everyone. There are no winners under those circumstances. And I will cite Britain in the 1970s. But the issue is that we've got a deficit, which means that day-to-day spending is higher than basically we borrow more than we spend more than is coming in.
Yep.
Right, so we're basically living off a credit card as a country, which we will be for the next few years.
Yep, and it's going to be my generation that are going to pay for it.
Well, it is indeed, and of course it's back to lockdowns, and we are where we are. Mistakes were made, but the issue is if you cut those taxes, the money has to come from somewhere. That will be borrowing,
right,
which is more debt and more inflation.
How much
printing more money?
How much money are we giving away in schemes to help people to deal with the cost of living crisis when we could very simply just not take as much money from them? We're giving people more money when in actual fact we could just stop taking as much money off them in the first place and they'll be just as well off. So we're giving a large proportion of our money to the government and they're giving some of it back. They don't need to do that, just cut the tax.
I agree with Sophie, and an element of a low-tax economy, Mark, is also about growth and business growth. We need to encourage business growth. Businesses are suffering, growth is suffering. Exactly. So those low taxes, those incentives, bring further jobs, bring investment, bring business, which then generates more revenue for the exchequer to pay back the debt. That is the capitalist model. Yes, it has its imperfections, but it drives growth. We can't grow, as Sophie said. We don't grow through taxation. We don't get more revenue for the Chancellor through increasing taxes. We get we get more taken from people, but a smaller pie to take it from.
I wonder whether Rishi, though, is actually playing the long game when it comes to tax cuts, that they will be forthcoming, but in a couple of years, closer to an election, and when the medicine of these high taxes has started to work.
Well, I think in an election campaign, Jam Tomorrow, that he's now in, Jam Tomorrow might not be the right message that he needs to deliver.
I mean, we need them now. Like, we're in such a poor position as a society where these tax cuts, they need to come soon. I mean, we're having a massive problem with labour shortages because people don't want to work because they're being taxed into poverty while the people who are sitting on benefits are doing much better than them. And that shouldn't be the way. That's not how Britain should work.
No, work must always pay. And I must say that a brilliant entrepreneur and commentator on the Dan Wootton show, Dan Wootton Tonight, Adam Brooks, just tweeted earlier today, we've got to have these tax cuts because businesses are closing as we speak and we will lose many more. Very tough news about Declan Donnelly, of course, one half of Anton Deck, whose brother has sadly died at the age of 55. He's a priest and a much-loved member of the family. Very, very sad indeed. A quick one on the Daily Mail. Red Wall backlash at Tory traitors, Kulveer. Many Boris fans not happy that he's been defenestrated.
Yes, well, as we were talking about earlier, these people voted for Boris Johnson, a Conservative Party led by Boris Johnson. They believed in Boris Johnson. And despite everything that they've been hearing and the criticism of him personally, the policies that they saw and what his agenda was, including levelling up, dealing with adult social care and how he's dealt with the major challenges that he's faced, they still wanted Boris Johnson. And I think that's something now that the Tory party is going to have to face a stark challenge for them and the next leader. How do they reach across to those Red Wall Tories and keep them on side in the next election.
Of course, we've got lots of stories from the papers. Sometimes this programme makes its own news. What about my panellist who's in the news? And it's a very happy story with which to end our paper review. Let's take a look at this exclusive. This is, I believe, in the paper. And it's the great news that our panellist, the gorgeous Declan Doyle, is, I believe, romantically linked to the brilliant and talented TV presenter Rylan Clark. Can you confirm this is true?
We're just dating. It's just been a few dates. We really got on. Yeah.
Can I say you look great together?
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I met Rylan the other day at an awards ceremony where GB News won for Best News Presenter, Eamon Holmes. And, of course, you can see Eamon and Isabel every weekday. But he has never looked happier.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. Where did you meet?
So we met at an event a while ago.
Did your eyes meet across a crowded room?
Something like that, yeah. Something like that.
Now, listen, who's more famous, him or you?
Obviously me. Come on.
Correct.
I'm here right now.
Certainly are. Any like concerns about having such a well-known partner?
I mean, yeah, it's just weird having to talk about it. I mean, it's actually only been a few dates, so it's really early on. We're really enjoying each other's company, so yeah, it's going well.
Oh, we wish you every happiness. He's a great guy, and you're a great guy too. So there you go, dream team.
Yeah.
There you go. I just want you to know we're all coming to the wedding.
I want to know which one of you is going to run for Prime Minister.
Oh, it's not going to be me. I think Rylan will.
There you go. Nice to have a happy news story. Next up, we'll have a look at the runners and riders for the Tory leadership with Britain's leading body language expert. See you in 2.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
How about this from Roy? Hi, Mark. Boris won the Red Wall and most of the country's vote as he was going to stop illegal immigration, but it's got worse and getting out of control. This is his main failure, and his wife is probably to blame for his weakness. There you go. Thank you, Roy. One of Boris Johnson's closest allies, whilst he was Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has announced he will stand to replace him. And judging by this registration for readyforrishi.com, he's been planning it for a little while. Who knew? Former Chancellor Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid both resigned earlier this week, which triggered a mass exodus from the party, forcing Boris to finally step down. The pair will join the shortlist to battle it out for number 10. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is the early bookies' favourite, and they'll be facing Liz Truss, Penny Mordaunt, Tom Tugendhat and others. But who looks like the real winner? Let's find out now with leading body language expert, Britain's official TV lie detector, Darren Stanton. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Really well. It's great to have you on the show. Let's take a look at some footage of Rishi Sunak and get your professional verdict on his body language. I think we've got a clip coming up. First of all, before we... Oh, there you go. We've got straight into it. All right. Now, what does this particular little video tell you about our future potential Prime Minister?
I think straight off the bat, Mark, he seems much more of a relaxed man than usual. He's a lot more animated because he's usually quite a very stoic man when he's sort of addressing Parliament and giving speeches. So I think he certainly seems a lot more of his own man, if that makes sense. So less sort of in the box straight away, just from that little clip.
He's also got a very expressive face, hasn't he, and a big smile.
He has. You know, he's one thing I look for is obviously consistencies. So the mind and the body are linked, obviously. So I'm looking for consistencies in what people say in line with their body language. And likewise, when I look at the deception and sort of lies, if you like, I'm looking for emotions the person might be portraying that aren't consistent with what they're saying. So with Rishi, we do see a consistency in terms of what he's saying and all his body language. So he's kind of speaking from the heart, you know, on that particular clip.
Yes, indeed. Have you sort of had any observations about Rishi Sunak at the dispatch box or making a keynote speech at party conference? I mean, does he strike you as a compelling performer?
I think that's one of the things that you'll probably need to work on. And again, I know sort of, you know, the sort of various parties. I've studied like myself that will coach them in terms of body language and delivery and projection. So I think, personally, I think he will probably need to work on his sort of delivery. But I think he's already quite a good speaker. But I think that's probably one thing that he'll be looking to address.
Robin, can we bring my panel in? Because I'd love to get their views on this issue. We'll sort of discuss the marketability of Rishi Sunak, because here's the thing, Kulveer, he is a polished performer, isn't he?
He has been seen as a polished performer, but I think the question is when he's on the stump, when he's really got a campaign, when he's got to carry the message. I think the question here for probably his fellow Tory MPs and party members, if he gets that far, will be, do they see him having that campaign stardust? Because he's got to follow in the footsteps of someone who really had it and reached the parts where, you know, other Tory politicians hadn't reached. So he's a bit untested, Mark. I think that's the question mark on his campaign skills.
Yes, I mean, he would, of course, Declan, be our first Asian Prime Minister, which would be a positive moment for the country, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it would be very positive.
Do you have a view on Rishi Sunak?
I'm interested to see how it all pans out, to be honest with you, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, let's move on now. I think, should we have a look at Ben Wallace, who is the Defence Secretary and a former military veteran? What do we think about his body language? Of course, he's a military man, so he's been physically brave in the past. Does he look like a fighter to you, Darren?
Maybe in the military, but in terms of his delivery, again, I think when people tend to rely on their notes quite a lot, it can come over being quite insincere. So, I mean, people use teleprompters and various other methods to sort of deliver the information, but straight off the back, for me personally, I don't really feel that's not selling the message to me, really, even, you know, with the sound down. He's looking down at notes, not addressing the actual audience, not looking at various people in the audience. So it just seems a little bit, not insincere, but it just doesn't seem to be congruent in terms of what he's saying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
so I think Sophie, look at the audience.
Yeah, Sophie, I don't know where this particular momentum around Ben Wallace has come from. I mean, he has, you know, to use that terrible expression, had a good war. He's shown great leadership. But, I mean, do you see him as a future PM?
No, I don't at all. And when I was looking at the bookies, I was like, really? Ben Wallace? Like, out of them all? I mean, he's never really contested hardly before. He hasn't had a main cabinet position. Why him? I don't think the membership will back him, to be honest.
Just a minute to have a look at, if we can, Sajid Javid and perhaps Penny Mordaunt as well. Let's have a look at Sajid Javid in action if we can. Thank you, Robin. OK, there's the Saj in the House of Commons. What's your thought about the Saj, Darren?
See, I was quite impressed the way he conducted that, because I think he delivered that with great gravitas, and it was speaking from the heart. He was looking up at the rest of the House as well as looking at notes, and I think that was a heartfelt speech. So I think that was, for me, I thought that was delivered very, very well. So I don't know what the rest of the panel think on that, but I
also
think he's a good speaker.
His posture looks pretty confident too.
Yeah, I mean, there was a big thing a couple of years ago when Theresa May was PM, where they had this ridiculous power stance that Sausage Javid adopted, where they'd sort of open their legs up. So the idea is that the more space we occupy, the more powerful we're perceived. But I think overall, I think it's quite a polished delivery.
Couple of seconds of Penny Mordaunt before we say au revoir. OK, last but not least, Penny Mordaunt. What do we think, Darren?
Again, I've not had a chance to analyse her quite a lot, but again, she comes over very coherent, very, quite a well-polished sort of politician.
Well, there you go.
Information.
Fascinating conversation. Well, look, Darren, the clock's against us. We'll catch up on that in a future occasion, Darren. But thank you so much for your contribution. And thank you for watching. Thanks to my amazing panel. And we'll do it all again tomorrow at 9. And stick around, because I'm doing headliners after 11. See you then.
Hello again, I'm Stephen with your latest forecast brought to you by the Met Office. And this weekend ahead looks pretty good for many places. Lots of fine, dry, warm, sunny weather to be had. Light winds emphasising that warm feel as well. One or two exceptions though. The far north of Scotland, we'll see some showers to take us through into Saturday morning. And we'll see this area of cloud just pushing its way further south into parts of Wales and the Midlands. The odd spot of drizzle on it, but a lot of places will be dry, and a lot of places seeing clear skies to take us into Saturday morning. Temperatures not falling too far, 12 to 15 degrees to take us into first thing Saturday. So the weekend will be dominated by this area of high pressure, which will be slowly working its way in from the Atlantic. And by Sunday, we'll be sat pretty much slap bang over the UK. These weather fronts to the far north will bring some rain at times to the far north of Scotland, but for many places, it is a dry picture. So Saturday starting off with some cloud in places, but I think across parts of Wales and England, this will tend to readily burn off, which means that for the bulk of England, Wales, southern and central Scotland, the east of Northern Ireland, lots of sunshine on Saturday afternoon, a bit of cloud coming into the far northwest. Here, a bit cooler, but further south in that sunshine, temperatures widely into the low 20s, peaking around 27 in southern England. Now, the cloud will continue to invade across western and northern Scotland through Saturday evening. Some heavier rain for a time across the far north of Scotland, particularly Orkney and Shetland. Elsewhere, though, it is a dry picture, again with lengthy clear periods for good parts of England and Wales. Some clear spells at Northern Ireland and the rest of Scotland too. But whether it's cloudy or it's clear, it's going to be quite a warm night with temperatures no lower than the low to mid-teens. So the air mass